Hi, good evening, everyone. If you're just now tuning in, welcome. And my name's Leslie Sapolsky. I am the founder of BioSource Naturals. I'm a naturopath, Reiki master teacher, an aromatherapist, and an emotional freedom technique practitioner. And I had, for many years, a private practice in Plymouth, Michigan, called Holistic Healing and Wellness. And that's where a lot of the products that were developed actually with clients in that practice. And tonight, what we're going to do is I want to explain a little bit about what emotional freedom technique is, how it works, how the results get better with essential oils and a combination of essential oils with other substances that are in the purification lotion. And we're going to do a live healing session. Prior to the live broadcast, I did start the Reiki and spent about a half an hour on that and asked for the highest healing and the highest good for anyone who's watching this broadcast now or maybe later and a replay. And I can feel that, the Reiki energy flowing right now. If you are watching now or later, it would be great if you could just hit a like. And if you do have questions during the broadcast, go ahead and post them, or you can private message me through the BioSource page. I'll answer those questions individually. Some of the topics, because we're going to focus on releasing shame and guilt, probably aren't best if they're personal on those comments. But if it's generally about some of the technique, go ahead and answer those. I'm sure other people would benefit from them. So anyway, I just want to say welcome and thank you for this. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to work with people because of a lot of other obligations and responsibilities. I'm not able to work one-on-one with people anymore. So this really gives me an opportunity to share what I know to be of benefit and in a bigger way. And if any of you are practitioners out there and are interested in this technique, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to help you as well. A couple of resources that I put in the post for this Facebook Live are a couple of things. So there is a link to the BioSource store under the free items. And in the free items, I have 26 different downloads of charts and scripts and all sorts of things. But what you'll find is all the emotional freedom technique scripts that I wrote for my clients, and these were part of the handouts. And they'll look like this. There'll be a chart with the EFT tapping points and a lot of suggested wording that you may find helpful when you're doing your own tapping. And what tapping or emotional freedom technique is basically, it's been dubbed as emotional acupuncture without needles. And so just like acupuncture, there are certain meridian points that are energy points where the emotional energy is basically stored in different organs and places in our body. And by thinking about those thoughts or emotions and tapping on different meridian points, it stimulates a release of that stagnant energy, and it enables the mind and body to repattern itself. And so if you've ever been in a feeling of, like tonight we're going to talk about and do a healing on guilt and shame, if there's ever been something that you went through where you felt ashamed or you felt guilty about something you did or didn't do, and you just can't let it go, and it's almost like it takes on a life of its own. This is where emotional freedom technique or tapping is really, really effective, because basically the tapping will disrupt that pattern, and so you get freedom from it, and that's where the name comes from, emotional freedom technique. What I found in my practice was that there were some tough cases. So there were some people that saw me and the tapping worked, but they had problems. So for decades and decades and decades, that they needed a little boost. And so that's where I started getting more involved in aromatherapy. And toward the last several years of my practice in my office, I had a whole compounding center where I had various lotions and carrier oils and roll-ons. And I would actually muscle test people prior to the emotional freedom technique. They'd tell me about what their issues were. I'd look up some references, and then I would combine various essential oils, Bach flower essences, and then later I incorporated some gem elixirs that are made by me and my family near Lake Huron out in the summer and at the sunrise. So it's got a lot of good energy imparted into it. Purification is a product that incorporates all of those things. So it has some purifying essential oils, such as lemongrass, citronella, rosemary, but it also has some other heart-centered ones to help incorporate and enhance self-love, such as rose and lavender and melissa. And it also has the Bach flower essences that help release and repattern anger, resentment, guilt, shame, so some of those are the Bach flower essences of holly, olive, elm, honeysuckle, and wild oat. And you can read more about those on our site or on any Bach flower essence site. If you're not familiar with Bach flower essences, they were created in England over about 100 years ago by a medical doctor named Dr. Edward Bach. And he was a brilliant man and left his private medical practice to develop these. And what they are is flower essences are essentially a branch of homeopathy, and meaning that they are vibrational imprints of flowers. And each flower, he found, had abilities to help release and repattern emotions vibrationally. So I incorporated those in the practice with this and with tapping, later the gem elixirs and gemstones, and then started muscle testing. And so I found that there were a lot of different, people had a lot of things in common, and that using the combination of the tapping, the essential oils, the flower essences was really, really powerful. And I saw huge results with a lot of clients. And so that's why I developed the products, because I kept seeing the same pattern over and over again. This is actually associated, purification is associated with anger, guilt, shame, resentment. Anger goes with shame usually, because anger is usually a cover for shame. So a lot of times clients that come in angry, you get down to it, and basically there's some things that they have some deep shame about, and trauma usually. And so sometimes it's like a layer of an onion where you have to really kind of release some of the anger, which is one of those protective emotions, before the shame can kind of get rooted out. So in traditional Chinese medicine, anger, resentment, guilt, shame, those are all associated with the liver meridian. And that is something that this is formulated for. And also it's for the solar plexus chakra. And that has a lot to do with the power center. So the instructions here are to actually apply this on the right side, which is the liver, gallbladder side, where those emotions are generally centered, and that's what's where they're considered centered in traditional Chinese medicine. And you put it just below the breast up to the hip. And you're using it for morning and night for about 2 weeks. And you start to see a lot of change, particularly with the tapping. And what we're going to do some of that tonight. So this is a helpful thing. It's also charged with light, with orange and yellow light, which corresponds to the energy of the solar plexus. So, hi everybody. I see everybody signing in. Just hold your questions. I will answer questions individually. If they're private questions, you can message me. But we got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to keep going on. But thank you all for checking in. Really appreciate it, and it's really my passion and my pleasure to do this. I don't know if most of you know, but I really, really loved my practice, but I had to close it. I had some family obligations, and anyway, so a lot of that's coming together so that at least I can do this, and this is something that, I want to be able to share with people because I know how much it helps people. Also, I think it's a good idea if you take some notes because you want to practice your own version of the EFT, and the reason is that I'm going to make a made up example and of shame and and guilt, but think about what you may have just can't let go of, whether it's something that you did or whether it's something that you didn't do or something that you're carrying around that was done to you, and it's hard for you to release that and be the happy and healthy person that you can be if you were to lay it down and let it go. And so we're going to go over that. Just a couple of other resources. So I mentioned that I put a link in for the free tapping scripts. There's about 20 some tapping scripts. The purification tapping script starter basically is in there. I also have a coupon for now until the end of the month for 25% off a bottle of the purification, if anybody wants to do that. And also the page with more information about the product and how to buy it. So, okay. So I want to also mention, I did start the Reiki before the session. If you're just signing in, maybe you didn't hear that. So that's been going actually since about 8:15. I really feel it going at this point. And, I want to just explain a little story about one of the clients that was in my practice that used the purification lotion and the tapping. And she was actually one of the ones that was part of the development of it. She was a really beautiful, interesting woman, very successful executive, almost 40, never married, kind of went through a string of, unsuccessful relationships with men, mostly because, they weren't supportive of her emotionally. And those are the ones that she kept attracting. And she knew that was a problem. She also was a very successful executive, but kept finding herself getting promoted and doing way more work than she's supposed to. I mean, and what I mean by that is, traveling constantly, all of her weekends. I mean, basically she was working like 6.5 days a week. And so we started to unpack that, but prior to the EFT, and started looking at, well, why are you doing it? And what's driving it? And basically it was a lot of shame. And her story was that she had a severely alcoholic mother, and she had many children in the family. And her mother just basically, checked out, could not deal with being a mom anymore. And her family got split up, and she ended up in foster care when she was, a young teenager. And although the foster care was a steady situation, it wasn't a great situation for her because there were a lot of other girls there that they were kind of an upper middle class suburb, didn't treat her very well. So she was kind of like the family servant. And, coming from the trauma of her dad just saying, I can't deal with it, and the mom being an alcoholic, and then just kind of being treated like a second-class citizen for most of her teenage years, she carried a lot of shame. And what you first noticed was that she was a really angry person. So she was putting off a lot of people. And so it was hard for her to make friendships. And she continued that pattern in her work life into doing way, way, way more than was required of her, what was needed of her. And it was a way to help her, prove her self-worth out there. So what we worked on was we used the purification. We did a lot of tapping on shame and emotional freedom technique. And over a period of about 7 sessions, she saw me about once a week, about 7 times. We saw a big change in her. She ended up getting a different job that was more reasonable and better pay and more recognition. And then she started to develop a relationship with a man who's really emotionally supportive of her. And so, the anger melted away, and you really started to see the beauty of her inside. And I saw so many of these transformations in my practice that was super exciting. So that was one of the reasons I put the Body Mind Remedy lotions on. Just because of the combination of the essential oils, the Bach flower essences, the gem elixirs, and the specific tapping, emotional freedom technique tapping was such a success, and that's always so beautiful to see that. Let's see. I want to begin first with a prayer. I did start the Reiki, but I'd like to just say a quick prayer here. And Heavenly Father and Creator, we ask that all viewers feel a release of shame and guilt and any anger which may be covering these emotions. We ask that they experience relief, peace, and forgiveness and self-forgiveness, and transform and become closer and more to your beautiful light. Amen. A quick note here. If any of you are familiar with the work of John Bradshaw or Brene Brown, Brene Brown's one of my favorites, they both talk about the difference between guilt and shame. And I want to make this distinction. So guilt and shame are both obviously negative emotions, but shame is far more toxic. The reason shame is more toxic is because it is something that's identified to the self. I'm a bad person, for example. But guilt is something more about, well, I didn't do this, or I did this and that was wrong. So it's more about behavior. And shame is highly correlated statistically with depression, addiction, eating disorders, violence, bullying, whereas feeling guilty is not. So it's a lot easier to release guilt feelings, whereas shame is something that, you're going to work, you would work at. And it can be done. I've worked with lots of people that have released that and have really, really bloomed, but it doesn't happen typically in one session. So it's a commitment, but it is something that you can release these things so that you are free from them and that they don't define you, even if there are things that have happened that are, really traumatic and really deep, dark secrets. And in my practice, a lot of people shared a lot of those things with me. And I saw the beauty from ashes of how, when they were able to let it go, how wonderful they blossom to be. So when we start EFT tapping, there's one thing we want to do is we want to think about two things. EFT tapping works best if you're thinking of something that is specific. So a very specific incident that happened. It doesn't work as well if you're global, meaning like you say, well, I'm ashamed of myself because I'm bad at math. Okay, that's an example I'm going to use tonight. That is not specific enough. So you can do this work, and if you are not specific on certain things, events, memories, it doesn't work as well. It just has to do with how the brain and how energy is patterned. So in that example, I'm ashamed of myself because I'm bad at math. It would be more like a better way to tap would be, I am ashamed of myself because I failed high school algebra in 10th grade. Now, I'm making that up. I wasn't great at algebra, but I didn't fail it. So, but this is an example where, so if you're thinking right now of what you want to release, think of a specific circumstance or event. So if it's a relationship or, child abuse or something that you feel a lot of guilt or shame about, then start with probably the first or the most traumatic memory that's connected to that. Okay, now when you're thinking of that specific event or situation, it's important to take what's called a Suds level, and that is basically your level of discomfort. And then what that does is that helps you monitor your progress. So if you're thinking about it right now, on a scale of 0 to 10, rate yourself. Do you feel a lot of, shame, sadness, anger? Is that an 8 out of 10, or is it more of a 4? But, take note of that right now. Okay, so at this point, does everybody basically have something that they want to tap on? And I'm going to give you part of the story that I'm making up, but you probably want to review this broadcast at certain points where you fill in your blanks and you do the work on what you want to tap on. But I think that this will help release some guilt and shame and anger, but you'll need to repeat it. Okay. When I've done this work one-on-one with people, most of the time, well, I'd say about half of the time, people are what's called psychologically reversed. And that happens about half the time. It's pretty common. What this means is that a lot of times it's not conscious, but we carry around emotions that are negative, but we're not aware of it, but we're resistant to letting them go because we feel like they protect us, like our anger protects us, or our guilt or our shame. Maybe, we feel like it gives us some sort of boundary, or we remember that person's not safe. But so the tapping, it has to have the reversal tapping usually has to come first, or it's not as effective. So what I'm going to say is completely counterintuitive. But go ahead and say it out loud, and by the end of this, you'll get a better idea of what I mean. But basically, when we're going to do this tapping, we're going to admit that we don't want to let these emotions go. Now, when I'm working one-on-one with people, I muscle test them, and I can tell if that's the case or not. Like I said, half the time that's the case, half the time it isn't. If that's not the case for you, it doesn't hurt you. When we do this exercise, it does, we just go on to the next step. So If you're familiar with these, you can go ahead and tap along with me. I like to start at the top of the head because there's a crisscross of several meridians and energy points. And so we're going to do a reversal, which basically means we're going to admit that we don't want to let emotions like this go. All right. And I'm going to use the example that, I failed high school algebra, but you go ahead and use your own example, either now or later when you want to practice. Okay. Even though I carry around these feelings of shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness, I do not want to stop feeling this way because I feel they protect me. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So we're going to say that 2 more times by tapping on what's called the karate chop point. Even though I carry around these feelings of shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness, I do not want to stop feeling this way because I feel they protect me. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And those are powerful words. A lot of times when I've worked with people, for them to say I deeply and completely love and accept myself, usually a lot of tears flow because it's really hard for a lot of people to feel that way. But this helps. Even though I carry around these feelings of shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness, I do not want to stop feeling this way because I feel they protect me. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So now we're going to tap on the other points. I do not want to stop feeling shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness, because these feelings have served a purpose. They seem useful to me. Side of the eye. I don't want to stop feeling shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness because these feelings have served a purpose. They seem useful to me. I don't want to stop feeling the shame, the anger, the guilt, and unforgiveness because these feelings have served a purpose. They seem useful to protect me. I don't want to stop feeling shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness because these feelings have served a purpose. They seem useful to protect me. This is a good point here, collarbone. Sometimes if you're feeling really emotional and you just tap this one point, it can really calm you down. I don't want to release these feelings of shame, anger, and guilt, and unforgiveness. I don't want to release them. I want to hang on to them. They seem to protect me. It's hard to let them go. Okay, take a deep breath, a deep cleansing breath, and let it out. So now what we want to do is we want to go into the release because we've cleared out the reversal. And we're going to start over with a karate chop point again. And with this case, since I have a top on, I'm not going to put it on my torso on Facebook Live, but I'm going to put some on my hands because the purification lotion, like we talked about, really, really helps amplify results. Even though I feel shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness because I failed high school algebra in 10th grade, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I feel ashamed, angry, guilty, and I can't forgive myself because I failed high school algebra in 10th grade, I love and accept myself deeply and completely. Even though I feel shame, anger, guilt, and unforgiveness because I failed high school algebra in 10th grade, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So we're going to go to the other energy points. I feel shame, guilt, anger, and unforgiveness. I feel so ashamed of myself for failing algebra in 10th grade. I feel guilty. Why didn't I study? So angry at myself. I feel shame, like maybe I'm not smart enough. I'm angry at myself. It really affected me a lot. I didn't get into the school I wanted to. And it's hard for me to forgive myself for goofing off. This anger, this guilt, this shame, this Unforgiveness. Deep breath. Okay. I mentioned forgiveness and unforgiveness. And what I found in my work was that forgiveness was the key. And, as a Christian, forgiveness is really emphasized, right? So, and I do think that it is the missing link in healing. And if it's not addressed, if you can't forgive yourself, if you can't forgive others, you carry it around. And what is the saying? We forgive others, not because they deserve it, because you deserve to be free, right? So one of the obstacles is that a lot of times, even though people know this logically, they want to let something go, they can't. They're stuck. And so this is where this type of work is really, really helpful. So with the Body Mind Remedy lotions and with the tapping, you can forgive yourself and others. But it goes back to the whole psychological reversal concept again, right? Because why do we not forgive others? Well, usually we feel like that unforgiveness or that hardness of heart protects us from future pain. And that's basically not true, but that's how a lot of people will feel. And so in order to do the tapping, we have to do a reversal of the unforgiveness and admit basically that we don't want to forgive. And so I always had a lot of fun with when I was muscle testing clients where, they would come in, and some of them had really bad childhoods and they really wanted to forgive their mom or their dad or their step parent or whatever. And then I would muscle test them. Hey, I want to forgive my stepmom. And the arm just flops down. And then there's a big laugh because they realize that basically part of them does not want to forgive, even though they know that's the path to peace. So we're going to do an exercise here where there's psychological reversal and basically tap and admit we don't want to forgive. And then we'll go through the release. So I'm going to continue with my made-up example about failing algebra and forgiving myself. But you go ahead and tap on whatever you need to tap on, whether it's forgiving yourself and others, okay? But in this case, not wanting to do it. So even though I do not want to forgive myself for failing algebra in 10th grade, I love and accept myself deeply and completely. Even though I do not want to forgive myself for failing algebra, I love and accept myself deeply and completely. Even though I don't want to forgive myself, I don't deserve it, for failing algebra in 10th grade, I love and accept myself deeply and completely. I don't want to forgive myself for failing algebra. I don't want to let the anger and guilt go. I don't want to let myself off the hook. I don't want to forgive myself for not doing my homework and failing 10th grade algebra. I don't want to forgive myself. I don't want to let myself off the hook. I want to keep punishing myself. I really don't want to ever forget it. Okay, all right, take a deep breath, blow it out. So at this point, you might want to do a check-in with your Suds level if you're tapping on your specific circumstances. Has any of this has it dropped at all? If you've got severe issues, when I work with people, a lot of times we have to go into round after round to get deeper and clarify the situation. So don't quit trying. And there are lots of other YouTube EFT resources that you can use to get better ideas on ways to phrase things that may be more specific to your circumstance. But it does work well. hopefully people are starting to feel a little shift. Okay, so we did the psychological reversal on not wanting to forgive yourself. You may have done it on not wanting to forgive someone else. But now we want to go through and actually do the release or the forgiveness. And as I said before, this is like missing key sometimes, but it's definitely the path to peace. So we're going to start with the karate chop point again. Even though I failed high school algebra in 10th grade, I forgive myself. Even though I failed high school algebra in 10th grade because I didn't study, I forgive myself. Even though I failed high school algebra in 10th grade because I wasn't paying attention and I was out there having a lot of fun, and then I failed, I forgive myself. Okay, I'm letting myself off the hook for failing algebra. I forgive myself. I'm going to let go of this anger I feel at myself for not studying. This anger, this shame for failing algebra in 10th grade. I'm releasing the shame of feeling not smart, of feeling like I was stupid. I'm releasing and letting go of the guilt I feel for not studying, the guilt I feel for not paying attention. I love and accept myself. I forgive myself. I'm letting myself off the hook. Okay, take a deep breath, blow it out. And just check in again with your Suds level to see if you're starting to feel a downward shift. One-on-one work, typically we'll see something like an 8 or a 6 Suds level down to a 4 or 2. And that's, usually a good sense of relief. Usually there's, lots of related issues where you want to just keep going and exploring. So if there, for example, if you had a parent that, was abusive and you have a couple of specific memories, you want to kind of tap on those specific memories and keep going through this forgiveness. Forgiveness of yourself can sometimes be a good thing, even if you're blaming somebody else or it really was somebody else's fault. I think my opinion is the reason is that kids tend to blame themselves for everything. So that may still be sort of stuck in your mind, psyche, emotional energy pattern, even though it isn't really your fault at all. So I like to use a phrase where I forgive myself and I forgive others for all things, real or unreal. I forgive myself. I forgive others for all things contributing to this problem that were real or unreal. And finally, we want to close with some positive affirmations. And I like to tap and reframe the mind and put in some positives here. So I am smart. I am free from shame and guilt. I forgive myself and others for all things related to this, real or unreal. God forgives me. I'm free from the past. I'm intelligent. I'm powerful. I can do anything I choose to do. I forgive myself. I'm letting myself off the hook. Take a deep breath. And that's basically the process of going through 2 psychological reversals and a release and forgiveness tapping, and then some positive affirmation. And I hope that you all have gotten something out of it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them, or you can private message me. I'd be happy to give you some guidance. If you're a practitioner out there, we do have a wholesale discount for practitioners if this is work that you would like to do. Nothing would make me happier than to help other people, help people, and because this is really powerful work when you're doing it one-on-one. If you do want the purification lotion, there's a link to buy it, as well as a coupon that for 25% off. That's good for the end of the month. And feel free to download any of the free tapping scripts. There's tapping scripts that are paired with most of the blends on the BioSource Naturals site. And thank you all. God bless you, and good night.